What secrets did the stone walls of medieval convents hold? Did the devout women within find solace in furry friends during the Middle Ages, an era stretching from the 5th to the 15th century? Number 7. More than just fables. Real-life stories of nuns and their furry friends. The stone walls of a medieval convent could feel vast and isolating. For women who had chosen a life of quiet devotion, often at a very young age, the absence of family, of the bustling world they had left behind, could weigh heavily. Yet, within these cloistered spaces, life found a way, often in the most unexpected forms. The stories of nuns and their animal companions are not always written in grand chronicles or papal decrees. They are found in the margins of everyday life, in the small, often hidden moments that reveal the enduring human need for connection, a connection that sometimes extended to the animal kingdom. Imagine a sister, perhaps Sister Agnes, tending to the convent garden, her hands stained with soil, her brow furrowed in concentration as she weeds around young herbs. A small, sleek cat, perhaps a tabby with emerald eyes, weaves between her ankles, purring a resonant rumble. This cat, let's call her Mittens, is not officially sanctioned by the strict rule of Saint Benedict, which most convents followed. The rule emphasized austerity, detachment from worldly pleasures, and a focus on spiritual devotion. Possessions were forbidden, and companionship, ideally, was to be found in God and the sisterhood. But Mittens is not truly a possession. She is a presence, a living shadow, a warmth on a cold evening. She earns her keep too, chasing the mice that threaten the stored grains and the valuable parchment in the scriptorium. Mittens might have been a stray who wandered in, attracted by the convent's relative peace and the scraps from the refectory. Or perhaps a kindly villager brought her to the convent. Knowing the sister's gentle nature, Sister Agnes finds comfort in Mittens' quiet company. After a long day of prayer, labor, and communal meals, to sit in the twilight of her cell or in a quiet corner of the cloister and feel the soft weight of Mittens curled in her lap. Her purr, a soothing rhythm, offers a moment of pure, unburdened peace. It is a simple joy, perhaps a forbidden one, but one that nourishes the soul in a way that endless contemplation sometimes cannot. Consider the illuminated manuscripts, those breathtaking works of art created by scribes and artists, sometimes within the very walls of the convent. In the margins of these sacred texts, alongside intricate floral designs or grotesque figures, one can sometimes glimpse the unauthorized residence of the convent. A dog peeking out from under a nun's habit, a bird perched on a desk, a cat playing with a ball of yarn. These are not always official portraits. They are often whimsical additions, perhaps sketched from life by a sister with an artistic eye, a silent testament to the animals who shared their lives. These tiny vignettes are not just artistic flourishes. They are historical whispers, hinting at a reality far more nuanced than the rigid rules suggested. There are even accounts, though often anecdotal or passed down through generations, of particular nuns forming deep bonds with specific animals. Picture a bird, a small goldfinch perhaps, rescued from a storm by a compassionate sister. This bird, named Chirp or Melody, becomes a constant companion, fluttering about the cell, perching on the sister's shoulder as she reads or prays. The bird's bright song fills the quiet cell with a delicate melody, a small piece of the natural world brought inside. The sister might feed it crumbs from her meager meals, speak to it in soft whispers, finding in its fragile presence a connection to life beyond the convent walls. This kind of companionship, while technically against the spirit of monastic detachment, offered an emotional lifeline in a world that could be emotionally stark. The story of Sister Hildegard of Bingen, though she was a formidable abbess and visionary, also hints at the deep connection some monastic figures felt with animals. While not explicitly about pets in the modern sense, Hildegard's extensive writings on the natural world, on plants and animals and their healing properties, reveal a profound reverence for creation. It is not a far leap to imagine that a woman so attuned to the living world around her would find kinship with animals, even if they were not her personal pets in the modern sense. Her respect for the natural order, her understanding of the interconnectedness of all living things, suggests an environment where animals were present and valued, perhaps even beyond their practical utility. One famous story, though possibly apocryphal, tells of a nun who was so attached to her little dog that it would accompany her everywhere, even to chapel. When the dog passed away, the nun was inconsolable. This tale, whether entirely true or embellished over time, speaks volumes about the emotional significance of these animal companions. It suggests that, despite the vows of poverty and the strictures against personal attachments, the human heart often found ways to express love and care, even for a creature that could offer nothing but its silent presence and unwavering loyalty. The very existence of such stories, whether in official records of admonishment or in popular lore, confirms that these animal relationships were a persistent, if often unofficial, feature of convent life. These are not stories of grand defiance, but rather of quiet perseverance. Nuns, like anyone else, sought comfort, companionship, and a touch of the familiar in their daily lives. In a world where human interactions were highly structured and often formal, the unconditional affection of an animal provided a unique form of solace. These animals were not just a breach of rules, they were often threads of vibrant life woven into the otherwise disciplined tapestry of monastic existence. They were reminders of the world beyond the cloister, and yet, paradoxically, they often helped the nuns find peace within it. The presence of these pets, however unofficial, thus the deeply human desire for connection, a desire that transcends the boundaries of even the most sacred vows. Number 6. Punishment and leniency. What happened when nuns got caught? The monastic rules of the Middle Ages were clear and strict. The Rule of Saint Benedict, the foundational document for countless religious houses, emphasized poverty, chastity, and obedience, discouraged personal possessions and attachments that might distract from spiritual devotion. Animals, especially those kept for pleasure or companionship, often fell into this forbidden category. Yet, as with many rules, reality was often more complicated than the ideal. When nuns were discovered to have pets, the consequences could vary widely, ranging from stern warnings to more severe punishments, revealing a fascinating interplay between strict doctrine and human compassion. Bishops or their representatives would tour convents, inspecting the spiritual and material health of the community. They would question the abbess, observe the sisters, and examine the convent's finances and adherence to the rule. These visitations often served as the primary mechanism for uncovering unauthorized animal companions. A bishop might enter a cell and find a small dog curled on a nun's cot, or a bird cage hanging near a window. The official response to such discoveries was almost universally negative. Pets were seen as a distraction, a worldly indulgence, and a violation of the vow of poverty. The most common consequence was simply the confiscation of the animal. Pet would be removed from the nun's care, often given away to a local villager or even, in harsher instances, abandoned. This was intended to be a gentle, yet firm, lesson in detachment. For a nun who had grown deeply attached to her companion, this could be a profound and painful loss, a personal sorrow endured in silence. The visitor might also issue a warning to the individual nun and to the abbess, reminding them of their duties and the importance of adhering to the rule. Records from visitation reports often contain entries admonishing sisters for keeping dogs and birds or other useless animals. Sometimes, the punishment extended beyond confiscation. A nun might be assigned additional penances, such as extra prayers, fasting, or periods of silence. In more serious or repeated cases, she could face a temporary suspension from certain communal activities, or even in rare and extreme circumstances be sent to a stricter part of the convent or another religious house for a period of reflection and penance. The severity often depended on the visitor's temperament, the abbess's disposition, the frequency of the offense, and the perceived level of defiance. A small, quiet cat might be overlooked, while a noisy, boisterous dog could not be ignored. However, historical records also reveal a surprising degree of leniency. Not all visitors were unyielding in their application of the rule. Some understood the human need for companionship, especially for women who had given up so much for their faith. The animal was small, quiet, and not causing a disturbance, or if it had a practical purpose like pest control, it might be tolerated, perhaps with a quiet word of caution. The abbess herself might turn a blind eye, understanding that the emotional well-being of her sisters was as important as strict adherence to every letter of the law. An abbess who genuinely cared for her community might prioritize their happiness and mental state over the rigid enforcement of a rule that, in some cases, seemed minor compared to the broader spiritual mission. There are even accounts of pets being inherited by nuns, especially those from noble families. If a wealthy young woman entered a convent, she might bring a dowry of goods and possessions, and sometimes a beloved pet, such as a small dog or a trained bird, would be quietly included. These animals, already accustomed to a life of comfort, might be tolerated by the convent authorities, at least initially, due to the influence or financial contributions of the nun's family. The reality was that monastic institutions often relied on the patronage of wealthy families, and complete alienation of these benefactors was sometimes deemed too costly. Furthermore, the official stance often clashed with practical necessity. As will be explored in later answers, some animals, particularly cats, were invaluable for pest control. Pragmatic abbess might quietly allow cats to roam the convent, knowing that they protected the precious books, documents, and food stores from rodents. In such cases, the pet status of the animal blurred with its functional role, making it easier to justify its presence. The rule against useless animals implicitly allowed for useful ones. The varied responses to nuns keeping pets highlight the complexities of medieval monastic life. It was a world of ideals and realities where spiritual aspirations met human needs and strict doctrine sometimes bent to the pressures of daily life. The stories of punishment and leniency are not just tales of transgression. They are reflections of the human capacity for attachment, the challenges of enforcing universal rules in diverse settings, and the enduring presence of animals in the lives of those who, despite their vows, remain deeply human. The fact that these records exist at all, detailing the discovery and removal of pets, confirms that the practice was common enough to warrant official attention, yet not so grave as to always merit the harshest penalties. Number 5. From squirrels to songbirds. The wild world of convent companions. When we think of medieval pets, images of hunting dogs or noble falcons often come to mind, creatures associated with the aristocracy and the hunt. But within the quiet confines of convents, the range of animal companions was far more diverse, reflecting both the practical needs and the simple joys of monastic life. Nuns, often with limited contact with the outside world, found companionship and fascination in creatures great and small, from the familiar barnyard animals to the wild creatures that wandered into their cloistered spaces. Cats were undoubtedly the most common and widely tolerated animal in convents. Their utility as rodent catchers was undeniable. Convent, with its stored food, books, and sometimes even a granary, was a prime target for mice and rats. Without effective pest control, these vermin could destroy precious manuscripts, contaminate food supplies, and spread disease. A good mouser was not just a companion, it was an essential member of the convent's workforce. These cats might have names, receive scraps from the kitchen, and curl up by the fire in the common room, blurring the lines between working animal and beloved pet. Their quiet presence was often overlooked by visitors who understood the practical necessity. Dogs also found their way into convents, though perhaps less frequently than cats, and usually in smaller breeds, large dogs could be disruptive and consumed more resources. Small lap dogs, often associated with aristocratic ladies, might have entered with nuns from noble families, forming a quiet, devoted bond. These dogs offered unconditional affection and a warm presence in a life that could be solitary. They might have been kept discreetly in cells or private gardens, away from the prying eyes of strict visitors. Guard dogs, larger and more utilitarian, might also have been present, patrolling the outer convent grounds, but these were less likely to be pets in the traditional sense, more akin to working animals. Birds were another popular choice for convent companions. A small songbird, perhaps a goldfinch, a robin, or even a starling, could be easily kept in a cage within a nun's cell. The bird's cheerful chirping or melodious song could break the silence of a solitary cell, offering a slice of the natural world to women often confined to the convent walls. Nuns might rescue injured birds, nurture them back to health, and then keep them as a quiet comfort. These birds were relatively easy to feed, requiring only seeds or crumbs, and their presence was often less conspicuous than a larger animal. Illuminated manuscripts often show birds perched on the hands or shoulders of nuns, suggesting a common and accepted, if unofficial, practice. Beyond the more conventional choices, medieval convents sometimes saw the presence of more unusual creatures. Squirrels, easily tamed if caught young, could become playful companions. They were often depicted in medieval art with noble women, and it is not a stretch to imagine them being kept by nuns who enjoyed their lively antics. Hares, too, were sometimes tamed, especially leverets, found orphaned. These animals, while demanding more care than a bird or cat, offered a unique connection to the wildness of nature that surrounded the convent. There are even hints of exotic animals. While rare, a nun from a very wealthy or influential family might have brought a small monkey or a parakeet with her, a rare and valuable possession that reflected her family's status. These exotic pets were extremely uncommon, but their very possibility speaks to the varied ways in which animals could enter and exist within monastic confines. Such animals would have been exceptional and would have certainly attracted the attention of any visiting bishop. Yet their presence, however brief, cannot be entirely discounted. Finally, the convents themselves often housed farm animals, chickens for eggs, cows for milk, sheep for wool. While these were working animals, not pets in the modern sense, the daily interaction with them could foster a certain familiarity and affection. A nun tending to the convent's small flock of chickens might come to know each hen, or feel a bond with the placid convent cow. These interactions, though rooted in utility, could still provide a form of animal companionship, albeit a less personal one. The diverse array of animals found in medieval convents illustrates the enduring human need for connection with the natural world. Despite the strictures of monastic life, nuns found ways to incorporate animals into their daily routines, whether for practical reasons or for the simple comfort and joy these creatures provided. The convent was not just a place of prayer and discipline, it was a microcosm of life, teeming with its own hidden inhabitants, a testament to the surprising ways that even in the most disciplined environments, life finds companionship. Number 4. A sign of nobility. When pets signified status in the stratified society of the Middle Ages, everything, from clothing to cuisine, could signal a person's social standing. Pets were no exception. While most monastic rules preached poverty and equality among sisters, the reality within convents was often more complex. Many nuns came from noble and wealthy families, and elements of their former lives, including a fondness for certain types of animals, sometimes entered the cloister with them. For these aristocratic nuns, pets could subtly, or not so subtly, become a quiet mark of their noble lineage, a lingering connection to the status they had renounced. When a young woman from a noble family entered a convent, she often brought with her a substantial dowry, a financial contribution that supported the convent and in turn secured her place. Along with this dowry might come personal effects, fine clothing, later replaced by habit, books, perhaps even musical instruments. It was not unheard of for a beloved pet to be among these possessions. A small, well-groomed lapdog, a highly prized parrot, or a delicately caged songbird could accompany a noble postulant, an indulgence quietly tolerated by the convent's leadership, especially if the family's patronage was vital to the institution. These pets were often distinct from the working animals, or common stray cats. They were creatures of leisure, cared for, not out of necessity, but for companionship and aesthetic pleasure. A small, elegant spaniel, for instance, known for its long ears and silky coat, was a popular companion among medieval ladies of the court. Such a dog brought into a convent would instantly set its owner apart from nuns who came from less privileged backgrounds. The dog would require specific care, perhaps even special food, and its presence might suggest a nun who retained a touch of her former worldly existence. Cost of acquiring and maintaining such animals also spoke volumes. Exotic birds like parrots were incredibly expensive, imported from distant lands, and symbolized wealth and a connection to the wider world. Keeping such a creature in a convent even discreetly hinted at a nun's family's extensive resources and influence. A beautifully crafted birdcage, adorned with intricate metalwork, or a collar for a dog made of fine leather, were small but potent indicators of a nun's background. These were not simply animals, they were remnants of a luxurious life, now transplanted to a more austere setting. Furthermore, the very act of having a pet, particularly one that served no practical purpose, was a luxury in itself. For most people in medieval society, animals were primarily utilitarian, working farm animals, hunting dogs, or pest controllers. Keeping an animal purely for companionship was a privilege of the elite. Thus, a nun who kept a pet for emotional comfort was in a subtle way continuing a tradition of aristocratic leisure within the confines of her religious life. This was not always a conscious display of status, but rather a reflection of ingrained habits and preferences from her upbringing. Visitors and chroniclers sometimes noted this phenomenon with disapproval. Monastic reformers often railed against such worldly indulgences, seeing them as a corruption of the monastic ideal. They would specifically mention nuns keeping small dogs and birds as examples of vanity and a failure to embrace true poverty. These criticisms, while condemnatory, also serve as historical evidence that the practice was prevalent enough to warrant consistent admonition. The very need for such rules and condemnations suggests that the impulse to retain these symbols of status, even indirectly, was a persistent challenge for monastic leaders. Presence of status pets in convents also highlights the social complexities within monastic communities. While all nuns were sisters in Christ, real-world hierarchies often persisted. Nuns from powerful families might hold more influence, receive better treatment, or even be elected to leadership positions like abbess. Their pets, therefore, could be seen as small extensions of this residual power and privilege, tolerated by the community due to the influence the nun or her family commanded. Ultimately, pets in medieval convents were not just about companionship or utility. For some aristocratic nuns, they represented a quiet, almost subconscious assertion of their noble identity. They were a reminder of a life left behind, a small comfort that linked them to their lineage, and a subtle indicator that even within the supposedly egalitarian walls of a convent, traces of the wider medieval social hierarchy could still be found. These animals, far more than simple creatures, were silent witnesses to the enduring complexities of human society and a persistent pull of worldly distinctions. Number 3. Forbidden comfort. How animals eased solitude. The life of a medieval nun was one of profound dedication, quiet discipline, and often significant solitude. While convents were communities, the emphasis on contemplation, silent reflection, and individual spiritual journeys meant that personal companionship could be limited. Vows of poverty and chastity were designed to foster detachment from worldly desires, including deep emotional bonds outside of a spiritual context. Yet, the human heart, no matter how devout, yearned for connection and comfort. In this often stark and emotionally demanding environment, animals, despite their forbidden status, became a surprising source of solace, offering a unique form of unconditional affection that helped ease the burden of solitude. Entering a convent often meant leaving behind all that was familiar: family, friends, worldly possessions, and the bustling life of the outside world. For young women, some of whom entered monastic life as children, this transition could be incredibly difficult. Cloister, while offering spiritual refuge, could also feel like a prison, especially in moments of doubt or loneliness. In this context, a small, warm, living creature could offer a lifeline. Purring cat on a lap, a wagging dog tail, or the cheerful chirping of a caged bird provided a simple, tangible comfort that the abstract concept of spiritual fulfillment sometimes struggled to deliver. The monastic day was structured around prayer, communal meals, labor, and study. Periods of silence were often enforced, and personal conversations were limited, especially in stricter orders. In such an environment, the presence of a pet offered a unique form of communication, one that transcended words. A nun could confide her quiet sorrows or simple joys to her animal companion without fear of judgment or distraction from her spiritual duties. The animal's presence was a silent, uncritical listener, a constant, predictable source of affection. Consider a nun who might spend hours in silent prayer or copying manuscripts in the scriptorium. The work could be monotonous, and the silence profound. The occasional soft sigh of a sleeping dog by her feet, the gentle rustle of a bird preening its feathers, or the quiet stretch of a cat in a sunbeam could offer subtle moments of connection, breaking the monotony and reminding her of the vibrancy of life. These small interactions were not distractions from her spiritual path, but rather quiet moments of rejuvenation that allowed her to return to her duties with a refreshed spirit. The bond formed with an animal could be particularly profound for nuns who struggled with loneliness or who felt a deep yearning for the familial connections they had left behind. Pets offered a sense of being needed and loved unconditionally. For women who had, in a sense, given up their future families and personal relationships, the act of caring for a pet, feeding it, grooming it, simply being present with it, could fulfill a fundamental human need to nurture and connect. This nurturing role, while unofficial, provided a powerful emotional outlet. Moreover, in a world where human interactions were often governed by strict social norms and hierarchies, the relationship with a pet was refreshingly simple and egalitarian. An animal did not judge a nun by her background, her status, or her spiritual progress. It offered pure, uncomplicated affection, a rare commodity in a structured monastic environment. This purity of connection was perhaps one of the most compelling reasons for nuns to risk disciplinary action by keeping pets. The very fact that monastic rules repeatedly forbade the keeping of pets speaks volumes about the widespread nature of the practice and the powerful emotional pull these animals exerted. If pets were not a significant source of comfort and attachment, there would have been no need for such constant admonition. The rules were a testament to the enduring human desire for companionship, a desire that even the most rigorous spiritual disciplines could not entirely extinguish. These animals, despite being technically forbidden, became quiet conspirators in the nun's daily life, sharing her solitary moments, offering warmth on cold nights, and providing a steady, comforting presence. They were not just pets, they were emotional anchors, providing a surprising and vital source of solace in a life chosen for its spiritual austerity. The story of nuns and their forbidden companions is a testament to the resilience of the human heart and its unending search for connection, even in the most unexpected places. Number 2. Not just for cuddles. Pets as peskrults. While the emotional comfort provided by pets was a significant reason for their presence in medieval convents, many animals served a crucial practical purpose that often outweighed the monastic rules against personal possessions. In an era before modern sanitation and pest control, animals were invaluable allies in maintaining the health and order of the monastic community. Many of the pets found in convents were not just for cuddles. They were essential workers, particularly in the unending battle against vermin. The medieval convent was a complex organism, often encompassing living quarters, a church, a scriptorium, a chapter house, infirmaries, and crucial storage areas like granaries, pantries, and cellars. These spaces were vulnerable to infestations of mice and rats, which were far more than a nuisance. Rodents could contaminate food supplies, leading to illness and hunger. They gnawed through wooden structures, causing structural damage. Most importantly, for a monastic community dedicated to learning and spiritual texts, mice and rats were notorious for destroying precious parchment manuscripts, illuminated books, and valuable documents which represented centuries of accumulated knowledge and spiritual wisdom. The domestic cat had long been recognized for its prowess as a hunter of rodents. Cat was not a luxury in a medieval building. It was a necessity. Convents, with their large stores of grain, cheese, and other provisions, provided an ideal environment for mice and rats to thrive. A resident population of cats, therefore, was not merely tolerated, but often actively encouraged, even if unofficially. These cats would patrol the corridors, the refectory, the storerooms, and especially the scriptorium, keeping the rodent population in check. The benefits of their presence far outweighed any abstract concerns about their status as pets or personal possessions. These working cats might not have been showered with affection in the way a modern pet might be, but they were certainly cared for. They would receive scraps from the kitchen, perhaps a bowl of milk, and a warm place to sleep. Over time, individual nuns would undoubtedly form bonds with specific cats, recognizing their unique personalities and appreciating their quiet companionship. Thus, a functional relationship often blossomed into one of affection, blurring the line between a necessary working animal and a beloved companion. Cat that kept the mice out of the prayer books was undoubtedly cherished. Dogs also played a utilitarian role, though less universally than cats. While large guard dogs were generally not kept within the cloister itself, smaller dogs could serve as watchdogs, barking to alert the community to unusual sounds or intruders. Their keen sense of hearing and smell made them effective early warning systems, particularly in a period when security could be a concern. Such dogs would be valued for their protective qualities rather than simply their companionship. Beyond pest control, some animals might have served other practical functions. In convents, with extensive gardens or agricultural lands, certain animals might have been kept for their contribution to the convent's self-sufficiency. While a specific cow or chicken was unlikely to be a pet, the daily interaction involved in their care could still foster a bond. A nun tasked with tending the convent's poultry might come to know the individual personalities of the hens and appreciate their contribution to the convent's food supply. Constant tension between the ideal of strict monastic poverty and the practical realities of daily life is clearly visible in the unofficial presence of these animals. Monastic rules might forbid useless animals or distractions, but a cat that saved a valuable manuscript from destruction was anything but useless. Visitors might admonish a nun for keeping a lapdog, but they might turn a blind eye to a convent overrun by cats, understanding their crucial role. The survival of precious medieval texts, the maintenance of food supplies, and the general health of the monastic community often depended in part on the silent, tireless work of these animals. Their presence in convents was a testament to the pragmatic approach that medieval people often took to daily challenges. They were not just emotional comforts. They were part of the practical machinery that allowed convents to function, blurring the lines between necessity, companionship, and the surprising ways that animals became integral to the daily lives of medieval nuns. Number 1. Strict rules said no, but nuns found ways. The central paradox of medieval nuns and pets lies in the stark contrast between official monastic doctrine and the lived reality of convent life. For centuries, across various religious orders, the rules governing nuns' lives were unequivocally clear. Personal possessions were forbidden. Worldly attachments were to be shunned, and focus was to remain solely on spiritual devotion. Yet, despite these strictures, countless pieces of evidence suggest that medieval nuns indeed had pets, finding ingenious and often subtle ways to incorporate animal companions into their cloistered existence. The foundation of most Western monasticism, the Rule of Saint Benedict, laid out a rigorous framework for communal living. It emphasized poverty, stability, obedience, and conversion of manners, a profound shift from worldly life to one centered on God. The rule stipulated that monks and nuns should own nothing individually, not even their own bodies. Any item, even the smallest tool, was to be considered communal property. This principle directly contradicted the idea of possessing a pet, which by its very nature implied individual ownership and personal attachment. Later synodal decrees and episcopal visitations frequently reiterated these prohibitions, specifically condemning the keeping of dogs, birds, and other useless animals within convent walls. These repeated condemnations are the strongest evidence that the practice was persistent and widespread, a clear indication that the rules were being broken, or at least bent, on a regular basis. If it wasn't happening, why would they keep saying, "Do not do this"? However, human nature is resilient, and the need for companionship is a powerful force. Nuns, sequestered from the outside world, often from a young age, faced a life of profound discipline and communal living that could still feel deeply solitary. The comfort of a warm, breathing creature, offering unconditional affection and a silent presence, became a highly sought-after solace. This emotional need frequently outweighed the fear of breaking a rule. Nuns found various ways to circumvent the official prohibitions. One common strategy was to simply keep animals discreetly. A small birdcage might be hidden in a cell. A cat might be allowed to roam the convent and be everyone's cat, or a small dog might be kept under wraps during official visitations. The abbess, who was responsible for enforcing the rules, might herself be lenient, understanding the human need for companionship or the practical benefits of certain animals, such as cats for pest control. She might quietly tolerate their presence, turning a blind eye to minor infractions for the overall well-being and morale of her community. Her own personal affection for an animal might also play a part in this leniency. Another approach involved blurring the lines between pet and working animal. As explored previously, cats were invaluable for pest control. Convent could justify the presence of numerous felines by emphasizing their practical role in protecting valuable manuscripts and food stores. These cats might, over time, become beloved companions, but their initial justification was purely utilitarian, making their presence easier to defend. Similarly, smaller dogs might be justified as watchdogs or as companions for the infirm, even if they primarily served as pets. The social dynamics within convents also played a significant role. Many nuns came from aristocratic families and brought with them a certain degree of privilege and the expectation of comfort including the presence of beloved animals. These wealthy families often provided substantial dowries and ongoing patronage to the convent, which could influence the abbess and visitors to be more lenient. A powerful family might quietly ensure that their daughter's cherished lapdog was permitted to stay, despite the rules. For these nuns, a pet was not just a companion, but a small link to the life they had left behind, a quiet assertion of their lineage. Historical records, while often focusing on the rules themselves, inadvertently provide evidence of their violation. Visitation reports from bishops and other monastic superiors frequently lament the widespread practice of nuns keeping pets. These reports list dogs, birds, squirrels, and other wild creatures as distractions that pull nuns away from their spiritual duties. The very repetitive nature of these condemnations throughout the medieval period signifies that the problem, from the perspective of the authorities, was persistent and difficult to eradicate. It was not an isolated incident, but a pervasive aspect of convent life. Illuminated manuscripts, created by nuns or within monastic scriptoria, also offer fascinating visual clues. In the margins of these sacred texts, playful depictions of animals, sometimes interacting directly with the text or the figures within it, can be found. A dog peering from under a nun's habit, a cat playing with a ball of yarn, a bird perched on a nun's hand. These are not just fanciful decorations. They are glimpses into the daily reality of the convent, reflecting the animals that shared the nuns' lives, perhaps sketched from life by sisters with an artistic eye and a love for creatures. The story of medieval nuns and their pets is a compelling testament to the resilience of human nature. Despite strict vows of poverty and detachment and the rigorous discipline of monastic life, nuns found ways to forge bonds with animals. These companions offered comfort, eased solitude, and sometimes even provided practical benefits. Persistent, if often clandestine, presence of pets in medieval convents reveals a deeply human side to monasticism, demonstrating that even in the most structured and spiritually focused environments, the universal yearning for connection and affection often finds a way to blossom, defying rules and enriching lives in surprising ways.